Okay, Miss Melanie. Before we open the Zoom room to participants, let us do a quick check. Miss Melanie, can you confirm your audio and video are working well?
Yes, can you hear me okay? I think my audio is working and hopefully you can see me as well. And I can hear and see you.
Okay, we will be recording this session for documentation purpose. So thank you for your understanding.
No problem.
Okay, good afternoon everyone and welcome. We are so happy to have all of you here with us today for this focus group discussion. My name is Ratna Lestari and I will be your moderator for today's session. I'm joined by my wonderful team from the Library and Information Science program at Universitas Sumatera Utara. So before we go any further, I'd love to give each of them a moment to introduce themselves. Please go ahead one by one. Hello, my name is Liza.
Hello, Miss Melanie. My name is Alwian Syarif Isyagian with student number 242029042.
Hello, my name is Elsa Pagita Bulsarigan.
Hello, my name is Dinda Sajida.
Hello, my name is Dita Luna Bedfage Clarissa Sihombing.
Okay, thank you, Prem. We actually lucky to have such a dedicated group behind this research. Now, today, FGD is titled Building a Borderless Ecosystem, Network Analysis and Global Museum Collaboration in the Digital Age. And so we will be exploring how museums across the world can build open, meaningful, and connected networks, especially in this era of digital transformation. We are incredibly honored to have a very special guest speaker join us today, all the way from the Perth, Australia, Miss Melanie Piddocke, Director of Culture and Community at the Western Australian Museum. And Miss Melanie brings a wealth of experience in across-border cultural collaboration, and we are truly grateful for her presence with us today. Miss Melanie, a very warm welcome to you. It's so wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you. Very interesting questions.
Okay. Before we dive into our discussion, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to everyone here. Could you share a little about your background, your role at the Western Australian Museum, and perhaps what drew you to the field of culture and community work?
Absolutely. Thank you. And really lovely to see you all and to meet you all. So as you mentioned, my title is Director of Culture and Communities at the Western Australian Museum. That essentially means that I am responsible for the humanities section of our museum. We're a scientific and a cultural museum. So we have a Director of Science who is responsible for the natural sciences and myself. So my departments include history, anthropology and archaeology, and maritime heritage, which includes both maritime history and maritime archaeology. So my background actually was primarily in music. My first degree was in music, and through a whole series of events, I became interested in working in museums and the power museums have to help societies understand who they are and who they want to be. So that's really what drew me to working in museums.
Okay, thank you so much, Miss Melanie. What a wonderful introduction. We can already see how much passion and expertise you bring, and we are very much looking forward to our conversation today. Now, uh, also take a moment to welcome our participants. Today, we are joined by students and attendees from various university, and we are really proud of the diversity and richness this brings to our discussion. And so, before we begin, three quick drum rolls. Number one is please feel free to ask questions at any time through the chat, and we will raise them during the session. And please keep your microphone mute unless it is your turn to speak. This session will be recorded for research documentation. All discussions will be kept confidential and used for academic purpose only. And most importantly, enjoy the discussion. This is a safe, open, and free space for all of us. The next is, we would like to say one small thing. English is not our first language, and we may not always find the perfect word. We ask for your patience and understanding if we make any mistakes along the way. We will always do our best, and we are truly grateful for your kindness. Now, let us set the stage for today's discussion. Our research explore the concepts of a borderless museum ecosystem, the idea that museum through digital collaboration and international networks can break down geographic, institutional, and cultural barriers. So let us begin.
Okay, thank you for the introduction and the insightful overview. To begin our discussion, let us move into the first theme, which is focused on digital infrastructure and physical experience in museum. For first question, many museums are now moving toward collaboration digital ecosystem. In your opinion, what risks might emerge if museums become too dependent on digital infrastructure?
Would you like me to respond now? I think it's a really interesting and important question. I think probably the main risk would be around redundancies. So as we all know, digital technology advances and changes quite quickly. So there's quite a high risk of hosting platforms or technologies or equipment to be quite quickly outdated. So I think the fast moving pace of the digital world, while fantastic and innovative, can carry with it its own risks in that technology very quickly becomes outdated. And I think the other part of that challenge is things like storage. It's wonderful ambition to have all of our collections digitized, but when we start to talk about preservation storage, the infrastructure that takes up and the resources that takes up is very significant. So I think the primary risks are really around equipment, redundancy, and forward planning, if you like, making the digital tools that we have fail safe for the future.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Melanie. That's such an important point. The risks of over-realization are real, and it's reassuring to hear that Western Australian Museum is thinking critically about this balance. Okay, thank you, Ms. Melanie. For the next question, do you think digital access to collection can ever fully replace physical engagement with museum object and exhibition?
And on one hand, it's a very easy, short answer. No, I don't think it can. I think digital innovation and digital collections and digital access are always a complement to and not a replacement for real objects. I think real objects are the things that set museums apart from any other institution. They're our point of difference, and I don't think any kind of digital experience can ever fully replicate the sense of engaging with history in a very tangible way when you're actually looking at the real object or engaging with the real object. And I think time and time again, audience research studies show that that's why people still physically come to a museum, which isn't to say that digital innovation isn't important and a key part of what museums do, but our core business, our core ideas always have to be around the physical objects that we have.
All right, now as collection move online, an important question emerges. How do we make sure their meaning travel with them? So we move to the next question. How can museum maintain authenticity and cultural context when collections are increasingly accessed through digital platforms?
That's quite a tricky one, I think, because increasingly not only are we able to digitise a single object and show that, but we're able to show, we have online exhibitions and so on. So in some senses, objects don't lose their cultural context because they can be shown as part of an online exhibition. But I still think that isn't replicated, that doesn't replace the experience of coming into the museum and the different ranges of interpretation within a museum. I think the digital engagement when you're looking at an object online or an online exhibition is quite a passive experience, whereas the cultural context and the engagement you have with an object is much more physical once you visit the museum. You are learning about the object or the history or the moment in time in a range of different ways. There are interactives that you can use, there are videos that you can watch, there are kiosks you can engage with, as well as the object itself. So I think that the authenticity and cultural context is really maintained through that, the different layers of engagement and types of engagement that we can have once you're physically in a museum gallery.
All right, context is everything, and you put it so well. And the contextual object online can mislead just as easily as it can inspire. Do you think certain cultural meaning are at risk of being simply or misunderstood online?
I think that's a risk for objects and histories everywhere, whether it's online or physically. And the way to prevent that happening really comes down to good research, multiple perspectives, and proper presentation. But I do think it's probably maybe slightly easier for it to be misunderstood online because you tend to be viewing things one thing at a time online rather than within the whole context of a display or an exhibition. So perhaps things can be taken out of context a little bit more when you're seeing them online in isolation.
All right, that concern about misrepresentation connect directly to something equally important, the power dynamic between institutions in global collaboration. Yeah, so the next question is, in global collaboration, how can museum avoid unequal power relation between larger or smaller institutions?
I think that really comes down to the project itself and mutual benefit. Identifying projects that have that equal mutual benefit so that it isn't really for the agenda and goals of one institution at the cost of another. And between larger and smaller institutions, there is going to be resourcing differences. They're going to have different funding. They're going to have different staffing. They're even going to have different equipment that they can have access to, particularly in that digital realm. So it's really about the core of the project having mutual benefit for both, and the potential perhaps for some of those skills, technologies and resources from the larger institution to then go into supporting the smaller institution, so that their skill level or their equipment or the number of collection items they have digitized, for example, is actually enhanced through that collaboration.
All right, the power imbalance is a real tension in international work, and the strategies you've shared over such a practical toward more equitable partnership. Okay, so the next question.
I think the answer is quite similar, and I think particularly between museums or universities doing international collaborations, there has to be a lot of work beforehand to understand each organisation's agenda and building a very clear and robust research agreement or collaborative agreement that shows the rights and responsibilities of each participating partner, so that the expectations are quite clear from the outset about what each institution needs to gain. Again, there may be differences between the types of technology that's available, but I would think that any kind of collaboration is really about sharing that technology or knowledge, so that everyone is enhanced, and it's not just about one institution draining the resources of another because it's useful for them.
Building on that, let's explore how museums can keep collaboration genuinely mutual and the growing role they play in shaping public discourse. How do museums ensure that international collaborations remain mutually beneficial rather than dominated by one institution's agenda?
Again, I think it comes back to the reasons for the collaboration. There should be shared agendas within that reason for collaboration, whether it's a shared point in history or crossovers in collections, something that is of interest to both institutions, and from that building a strong research agreement or collaborative agreement, so that there's an equal participation and also an equal weighting. It's not that one institution's collection is better or more important or receives more attention than another's. It is that both collections, both institutions, both skill sets have something to offer that the other one doesn't have. So finding those points of similarity and difference and building those into a research agreement or a collaborative agreement that ensures that one voice isn't privileged over another.
Mutual benefit has to be built in from day one, not assumed. Thank you for such a candid and honest perspective on this. And have you seen examples where collaboration appeared unequal and what could have been improved?
Wow, I can't actually think of an example off the top of my head for a museum-to-museum collaboration. I will say that within Australia, we have the Australian Research Council grants structure, which funds large research projects from anything from 3 years to 7 years, and these are projects that have multiple collaborators and institutional partners. The funding structure can only be managed through universities and can't be managed through museums. And university researchers are the only people that can be the chief investigators. Museum curators can't be chief investigators. They can contribute, but they can't direct the research necessarily of these. So I find that particular funding structure disadvantages museums to a certain extent because it doesn't always allow museums to participate as equal partners in the research project. And it tends to mean, and this is a generalization, it's really down to the individual researchers and individual project and how it is run. It tends to mean that the university researchers are using museum collections for their own gain or their own interests, which aren't necessarily the same interests or needs of the museum itself. And it might not necessarily represent the real world experience of working in museums. So it's a much more academic perspective, whereas we are a public institution. First and foremost, we have a responsibility to the public. So we have sometimes have different and priorities to some of the researchers that come through that program.
Thank you for the honesty. Now, beyond collections and partnerships, museums are increasingly becoming voices in the wider social conversation. Let's explore that. Do you think museums today are becoming more socially and politically influential through digital connectivity?
I certainly think museums are becoming more socially influential, both through digital connectivity and the general work of the museum. Whether politically influential is a tricky one. I think there is an increasing expectation politically that there should be digital outcomes and digital representation of museums, but whether that is influencing the political landscape, I'm not completely sure. But I certainly think that through digital connectivity, we have a wider reach. So whether it is socially or politically, we are certainly able now to reach wider audiences than we were without digital connectivity. So we're able to share our thoughts, our stories, our collections with a wider audience, but also receive different ideas and different thoughts and collaborate with many, many more institutions than we could before. So I think in that sense, it's a bit of a two-way influence politically and socially, which has absolutely been enhanced by digital connectivity.
Museum as civic space, that's really powerful framing. The question of how actively they should engage with social issues is one the whole sector is wrestling with. In your opinion, should museums actively engage with contemporary social issues or remain more neutral?
I think about this a lot. I absolutely think museums should engage with contemporary issues. Contemporary and past issues. I think we need to report and help people understand our past in all its terrible things and good things. History is a very nuanced area. So I think as human beings, we have a tendency to like to have things in very clear-cut boxes of good and bad, right and wrong. But history is much more complicated than that. And I think museums have a responsibility not only to help people understand why and how things happened in the past, but also why and how those things may have contributed to the way the world is today, and show people different perspectives, different viewpoints, help them understand perhaps a culture or a place or an event that they didn't really appreciate before. It doesn't tell them how they should think about a particular topic, but it invites them to think critically and engage with the topic and draw their own conclusions from the information that's presented. So I think it's absolutely vital for both events in the past and to help us shape what we're thinking about now as well.
Okay. That's a wonderful, Miss Melanie. Let's now shift our focus to some of the bigger picture questions. The role of the next generation and the broader social mission of museum. Question 7 is, how can museum encourage younger generation to participate in international culture collaboration in the digital age?
Look, I think museums constantly have to ask themselves if they are relevant to younger generations. But I think specifically in the digital age, obviously how we employ digital technologies and can reach remote schools and so on with our collections that we wouldn't have been able to access otherwise. But I think in terms of international collaborations, I think there's some really exciting ideas to think about or pursue in both connecting young people internationally, engaging with digital technologies, but also sharing perspectives. For example, why could there not be a program wherein school students come to our museum here in Perth and do a virtual tour from their perspective, which they then share with students in Indonesia? And then students in Indonesia could show Australian students virtually around their local museum. So I think that would help young students to learn about another culture, connect with another culture, and hear about the ideas and thoughts and perspectives about that culture from people, from their peers, from people of their own age, so that it's a much more engaging and perhaps uninhibited experience for them. It's less of a taught experience and more of a organic experience for young people.
Okay, this is so relevant for everyone in this room today. As student, you are exactly the generation museum needs to reach out and to hear from. Your perspective matters deeply. And what types of digital platform or activities do you think are most effective for engaging younger audience?
Anecdotally, I would say, seeing how young people engage with objects and digital technologies in our museum, I think they don't like something passive. They tend to not sit and listen to an audio recording, for example, but they will engage with a touch screen which invites them to create a puzzle or move things around, which is still engaging about objects in the collection, but also causes them to think and be active, physically active as well. So I think those kinds of digital engagements are really positive, but also I think digitally connecting with real people, if that makes sense. So as we're communicating now, instead of it being a static experience, we're able to share ideas and communicate internationally online. And I think increasingly young people who have grown up in an age where they're constantly connected do find this kind of an interaction really natural, really normal, and really enjoyable. So I think that's a really key part of engaging people online as well.
We are now entering our final section, and this last question look both inward and forward, asking what truly makes collaboration meaningful and where it's healthy. Next question: how important is storytelling in creating meaningful international museum collaboration, Ms. Melanie?
That was question 9, was it? How important is storytelling in creating meaningful international museum collaboration? I think storytelling is absolutely key to every part of what museums do. It's the stories that we tell that engage people in our subject matter. And I think that's even more enhanced in digital collaboration, because we're not engaging physically with the object when we're doing digital collaboration. We are relying on the strength of the stories that we're telling to really carry that interpretive weight. So I absolutely think storytelling is critical, but I think it's really critical also in finding moments of connection. You know, to go back to some of the earlier questions around how to make collaboration equal with international partners, perhaps finding those storytelling touch points that are the same, that are points of similarity, that people either think is something that we share or something that contrasts to our own experience. Those different types of storytelling are a really strong way to collaborate digitally.
Yes, that's a great explanation, Ms. Melanie. Thank you so much.
Okay, Miss. Sorry. For next question, do you think future museum collaboration will rely more on shared digital knowledge rather than physical collection exchange?
I hope not. I think that the shared digital knowledge will become increasingly important, and I think it will mean that we are able to understand each other's collections in much more depth than we could before. But I think the end result should and will always be a physical collection exchange. So I think the kinds of object we exchange may be influenced by the digital collaboration, and these physical exchanges will start with intensive digital collaboration. But as that digital technology becomes more advanced and we understand more about each other's collections, I think the depth to which we can engage in physical collection exchanges will actually be enhanced rather than limited.
And then what advantage or limitation might arise if collaboration become primarily knowledge-based instead of object-based?
I think the limitations will always be around that physical engagement with an object. I think that technology is incredible, and there is so much we can glean from an object or gain from an object digitally. But I think we still have researchers come to us to see the physical object. They might be able to access it online, but they still want to come and see the actual object. And whether that's about not quite trusting a digital reproduction or not being able to replicate the authenticity of an object completely digitally, there's maybe textures and colors and markings or sensations that you can't engage with digitally, that researchers or audiences still want to engage with in person. So I think that would always be missed if it was reduced to digital collaboration only. And I think there's kind of organic discussions that develop between collaborators when you meet in person and discuss objects in person. There's a natural flow to the conversation, and ideas get sort of traded and exchanged in a way that isn't necessarily as organic or as easy to do in a purely digital collaboration.
Okay, the next question is by me, Miss Melanie. I want to ask what lesson from international museum collaboration could also be applied to other cultural or educational institution?
That's a tricky question. From my experience, international museum collaborations, or at least museum to museum collaborations, have generally been very enthusiastic. You know, we're peer-to-peer, professionals to professionals. We're just excited by history and objects. So I think that kind of equal footing is something that could be applied to other collaborations, like I touched upon before in some of the earlier answers, particularly around university to museum collaborations. Universities have an incredible resource of knowledge and research, and the ability to research deeply and think deeply about topics that we don't necessarily have the time or opportunity to do. But we have the real world of experience of working with communities, working with collections, providing public outcomes. So I think there could be, any collaboration should have that recognition of different types of skills and experience that can be offered from one partner to another without one being considered better or more important. They're just different experiences that can be shared.
Okay, as we know, museum is a model for the wider cultural and educational sector. That's such a generous and exciting way to think about the value of this work beyond the walls of any single institution. And I want to ask again, which sector do you think could benefit the most from adopting museum collaboration practice?
I think probably, certainly in Australia, universities. Again, I think, and again, this is not all universities or all collaborators, but in some experiences, I found that it is more about universities telling museums what they should be doing, rather than universities bringing their expertise and experience to museums and listening to museums about what they're already doing, or what the museum sector needs, or what the challenges of the museum sector are. So it feels a little bit more one way in university collaborations than a two-way exchange. But as I say, not all universities, not all collaborators.
Okay, and now our final question. This is question which have the most imaginative for one for last. Okay, the question is, if researchers and technology were no longer limitation, what kind of international collaborative museum project would you most like to create?
I think if we had no limitations on what we could do, we'd probably continue to do what we're already doing, but just more of it. And I think particularly for us, that is exhibitions, sharing stories with the public, and sharing and bringing stories to the public that they might not otherwise have been exposed to. So I think for us, I'm particularly keen to see our organisation collaborate on research and exhibition projects. When I say research projects, I always have in mind that those would probably have an exhibition outcome as well, because if we just do research and don't tell anyone about it, then it's not that exciting. So it's always exciting to share research with people in various public outcomes. So I would really like to see our institution continue and expand on collaboration, particularly in the Indian Ocean area, because that is something that's quite unique to Western Australia and not really something that's replicated in the eastern states of Australia. And there's all sorts of interesting shared moments in history, shared experiences of history across that Indian Ocean world, if you like. So I think we would love to do more of that. And obviously digital technology would be a key part of starting those discussions, exploring people's collections, exploring the different ways that people have experienced history and the different viewpoints that people have of history. So I think more of the same, just bigger and better than what we're already able to do.
Okay, that's a beautiful vision to end on. That dream project tell us about everything about why this work matters and what museum after their best can truly become. And before that, I want to ask again, this is the last, okay? What impact would you hope this project will have a global audience or cultural understanding?
I hope this project helps people understand the different ways that institutions are trying to work together, the different possibilities of the way that we can work together, and the different ideas that can potentially be exchanged when we work together. And I think it's a goal of all of us, but it's not always particularly well articulated that we shouldn't be sitting in our own little boxes and just talking to ourselves. We should be talking to other people. We should be engaging with other people. But I think the strength of a project like this is it's helping to make visible and to articulate the ways in which we can do that, which might not always be so obvious. So this hopefully will highlight the different ways that this can happen, and that it's really important that we do these collaborations and we continue to have these conversations.
Okay, thank you. That's all question from us. So before we close, we'd like to open the floor for questions from our participants. If you have a question for Ms. Melanie, please type in the chat and we will read them out and give Melanie a chance to respond. Okay, Miss Melanie, we have a question from one of our participants. Naila, they ask, uh, Miss Melanie, in your perspective, what role should museum play in addressing global issues such as cultural identity, historical reconciliation, and or social inclusion? Would you like to share your thoughts on that, Miss Melanie?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really important question. So to think about cultural identity, I think museums play a really important role in helping us understand who we are, but also why we are who we are. And historical reconciliation, certainly in Australia, is a big part of that. So I think museums should engage with and acknowledge the past without fear. Bad things have happened in the past, good things have happened in the past, and we shouldn't ignore the bad things to try and make ourselves feel better about who we are. I think it's a mark of a mature institution or a mature society to acknowledge the wrongs and bad things in the past. And museums have a very powerful role to play in that, in providing perhaps a safe space for people to approach those ideas. Sometimes for the first time, they might not be aware of some of these events. They might not be aware of some of the injustices of the past. And certainly research in Australia here is showing that museums are one of our most trusted public institutions. We're more trusted than the government. We're more trusted than a number of other public institutions. So we need to use that trust to help people understand ideas which may be challenging or different, which then helps build cultural identity and move towards historical reconciliation. And I also think social inclusion has changed a lot in museums. Museums used to be something for the elite and educated people to enjoy, but more and more museums see themselves as having a role for everyone. And certainly at the Western Australian Museum, our job is to represent the whole of Western Australia, not particular sectors of society or particular individuals or particular moments in time. We try and be representative of everyone in Western Australia. And I think that's a really important part of social inclusion, because people will engage with the museum more if they see themselves in the museum.
Okay, thank you so much, Miss Melanie. That was truly a wonderful answer. And I think it's a perfect note to wrap up our Q&A session today. So before we close, we'd love to take a quick screenshot together for documentation purpose. It won't take a long, we promise. Thank you so much.
Okay. Before we close, could everyone, the audience and Miss Melanie and we are, turn camera for a moment. We love to take a quick screenshot together for documentation purpose. It won't be take a long. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay. The next is can we do this L for literacy? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay. The last, can we do a sign card for a cute picture? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you so much, Miss Melanie, and thanks everyone. The next is will presented by Tata.
Okay, and with that, we bring our FGD to a close. Miss Melanie, we cannot thank you enough. The insights today have been truly exceptional, candid, truthful, and deep inspired us. For our students here in Medan, having the opportunity to hear from someone with your deep experience in global museum collaboration and cultural program is something we carry forward in our research and beyond. To our participants, thank you so much for being here and for your engagement throughout the session. Your curiosity and question make this discussion richer for everyone. Okay, thank you once again, Miss Melanie. We wish you a wonderful rest of your day in Perth. And everyone here in Indonesia, terima kasih. Sampai jumpa dan semoga diskusi hari ini menjadi awal dari kolaborasi yang intens. Bye-bye.
Terima kasih.
Bye,
Thank
Miss
you.
Melanie.
Thank you. Excellent questions. I've enjoyed it.